Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Content Crowd. I'm your host, Trevor Grimes. The Content Crowd is a podcast where we like to explore what makes content resonate, from creative habits to point of view shifts to behind the scene breakdowns and more, so that listeners and me alike can start mimicking others and start making something that actually matters. I like to start all these episodes off by reminding you that this podcast is sponsored by Scrappy ABM. Scrappy ABM helps you build repeatable account-based plays and teaches you how to actually do them and own them so that you can bring ABM in-house when you are ready. So go to scrappyabm.com to find out more. Today I'm joined by fellow ABMer, I guess I could say, Greg Toler. How's it going today, Greg?
Hey, look at that. It's good. How's it going for you?
Doing all right. I'm kind of struggling today. I don't know why. I think it's just the getting close to the end of the year, and I'm kind of just like things are falling apart. Got to grease the wheels a little bit. But thank you so much for being here. Me and Greg have recorded like mini episodes that never really launched because they just kind of get lost in the realm of recording somewhere. But I was finally able to grab a time, which was totally on me, because I'd be, can you do this today? And then he would never hear back from me. But now it finally worked out. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. I know you and I have had, over the last 2-ish years or so, a bunch of conversations about all sorts of things content related. And so I'm excited to actually have one officially on the books and, running. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Oh yeah, based on the just the interaction on LinkedIn today, it seems to be one that a lot of people were super excited about, because it was just like, usually like when I just share like the post about a podcast episode, I'll get like 1 or 2 people, but this one seemed to be really popular. So I guess I'm putting all the pressure on you to really bring something.
Oh, no pressure. All right.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, let's just start off. We've had this conversation a lot about how you sort of introduce yourself at parties. And I think you usually tell people that you work in realty, but I think you should tell what like you actually do for this podcast.
Yeah, so I am a consultant on operations and go-to-market, and I also founded a company called Boost IDEO, which is an early stage startup. And so over the last, I've been consulting for almost 10 years, in and out in a few different ways. But I was, over the last 2.5 years, I was also at Scrappy. I was the fractional COO at Scrappy, transitioned into full-time, now transitioned back into fractional. And I'm kind of kicking off the new year doing basically full-time consulting and also full-time trying to build Boost. So I'm super excited for the transition and kind of the shift there. Things have gotten really busy on the product side, which is great. Yeah. I am doing a lot of consulting right now on operations, specifically process development, product development stuff. So it's been a fun transition, but that's why you and I have had so many of these conversations, because we talk about product or content or ABM or all sorts of different things. And so now I'm excited to get one officially on the books.
Yeah. And while I was, so you mentioned that, we've been working together at Scrappy ABM for around 2 years. And then while I was on paternity leave, I think you handled, maybe not on purpose, I think it ended up where you handled a lot of the content writing. So I think that gave you, you've always been, as long as I've known you, you've been a content writer of some sort in some way. But I think when I came back, you were just kind of like, I'm glad you're back, because I'm tired of writing. So what was I'd love to know like your experience with that and what it was like. I don't know, like what made you kind of like, you didn't say you got burnt out, but like you've always been a writer of some sorts. What was different about writing in the capacity or the way that you were versus like your typical mode of writing?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, so I've managed content teams at a bunch of different companies and multiple times. And so, and even at Scrappy, right, with the delivery team. And so it's interesting being on that side of it, because I can think about content very strategically, the uses, the practicality of it, how it applies, what type of content it is, and like actually give like a lot of guidance on more of the strategy and ironically the process side of use. But what was interesting, shifting back into an actual content writing role, I realized how non-creatively bent I am that direction, or at least naturally creatively bent that direction, because when you would write things, it would take you a matter of hours, and when I would write things, it would take me days uh, to pump out the same level and likely the same quality as you from a content perspective. Now, some of it is the clients that I was working on, as you know, very technical.
Yeah.
But I think some of that too is in the way that I approach content, and why I'm very happy for you to have it back, is I approach content in very similar ways to how I approach most everything else with process development. I feel like everything has to be caveated, every circumstance has to be accounted for. Like, you have to be able to identify. I call it a context sandwich when we talk about communication, but like, it's context, details, context, so that somebody knows where they are and things. And so there's just so many different things that I feel like for the reader or for the consumer should be said, or need to be said, to give them the level of quality and value that I think is so important. That a lot of my content writing becomes so structured and so organized rather than creative, or I kind of get myself into patterns. So it's a very different muscle to flex, versus the content that I usually write is more technical documentation now, process documentation, and like strategy and analysis documentation, those types of things, versus more on the creative veins.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that because so in terms of like having like the context when you're writing, like somebody needs to know kind of where they're at. Well, no, I would say that's something that I learned from you that I started incorporating into writing that I think made my writing better, was the idea that when you're in the middle of something, you should like know where you're at. So my philosophy writing has always been like, if you mention something, like you should close it. Like, so if you mention a gun in act 1, it should go off in act, like everything you talk about should have a open loop and a closed loop. And I think like when I started writing like standard operating practices, so very like technical stuff that I was not used to writing, like one of the things that you were always like, this is good, but like if I'm in the middle of the doc, I should know like where I'm at and why I'm there. And so that sort of like bumped up the level of, for me, knowing like where you're at in something, like adding that context of like why we're here and what we're going to do and then what it looks like, and not just doing that in a giant piece, but kind of doing it in like every section. So I think that like you're talking about being creatively bent in a certain way. And I guess the word creativity is like super subjective in this, because when you're writing for a SaaS company, how creative are you really being? What is the creativity that is there? Like, you're probably not using too many like idioms and stuff like that. You're probably not using a lot of like allegory and trying to paint a lot of vibrant pictures. Maybe you sprinkle throughout, but you're not doing that. I think like what the creativity part of it is that making like a boring blog about ROI reports seem like something that is actually like educational and entertaining to read in some way. So like, I don't know. I think like I enjoyed seeing like, because just for everybody to know, like I don't know how many pieces of content you wrote, but I picked up from where you left off and took everything you had and created like 8 more pieces after that. And so there'd definitely been a shift in the style of writing from where I was writing and then you here. And then now it's like, how do I pick up where Greg left off and not like go back to how I was writing before, but also not try to mimic Greg, because I'm not going to be able to do that in the same way and make it flow. So I think like that was one of the things that really positively influenced the way that I started writing after that. Like I felt like I came back from paternity leave with like a different mindset on like writing. And so, because my style of writing has kind of always been, whether it's in emails or blogs, is I write the way that I talk, kind of like it's and I don't mean that like I'm super
probably means I do that too.
Well, it's not and I don't even mean that I'm super informal or in any way, but I just talk. Everything's like a conversation is how I've like always written. And I know that I like in the B2B world, I'm not saying I'm like like blowing minds or anything like that, but I know that like when Phil came in, like when we started writing, I was like, you should try to write like this way. And he was like, one of the things I mentioned was like, I was like, just see what happens if you just write it this way. Like, not like trying to change the way he does anything, but he was like, well, how do clients respond to that? And I was like, you'd be very surprised that like these like stiff buttoned up B2B SaaS companies read an email that you wrote that sounds very conversational, and you kind of like push them to like, just try it, and people respond to it. And so I think there's the balance of how can I be contextual and informative and technical, but also make it like a joy to read, but also if you stop in the middle of it, you know where you're at. Like there's a lot of pieces to it. And I think that
there is
those different aspects really helped me like become a better writer, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's all intentionality, right? What is it for? What's the use for? But I also think it's interesting because when you talk about creativity, and you made the comment, how do you define creativity, right? Like, I think in the context of writing specifically, but just kind of directionally, there's like stylistic and like tonal creativity, which is something that I think that you very much excel in. You're incredibly creative in the way that you approach things, the way that you write things, the way that you kind of compose things in general is incredibly creative. And I would say that my type of writing style is less in the traditional sense of creative writing. You know, it's not that. But what I think I excel in from a creativity perspective is more of a creative perspective. I feel like I'm really good at having an objective view of the circumstance, the context, why we're doing things, those types of things. And so I can tend to bring a different perspective or a different direction or a more unique or creative perspective to something that when I write it ends up being the same tone and probably stiffness technical writing that I used to, but I can at least do it from an intentional strategy with a level of perspective that maybe not everyone would have approached the same situation to. So it's all about seeing different things, which is why I'm better at process and other things. I'm good with constructs. I'm good with organization. I'm good with solving problems. I'm good with those types of aspects of creativity. But like the traditional sense of creative writing and the execution of that from a writing perspective, you're far and above where I am on a writing style. So I'm glad you didn't just stick with what I did, but you adapted it and made it your own.
Well, and not just to like to continue glazing you or anything, but like you mentioned that, you're good at being like objective, which is like I'm terrible at that, and that was another thing that I'm glad you brought up. And like your style of creating or thought process was like, I feel like when I was working through all of the issues I was having with like content creation when I was working with you, I'm like, this is not an objective thing. How do I make it objective? How do I get somebody to have an objective opinion or land on an objective idea from this? And I know we had like a phrase we used to use, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was like, ask the objective questions that make subjectiveness feel objective. I don't know what it was, but it's basically like ask the right question. It's like ask the right question about something subjectively, but make the question like an objective question. So you have to like come up with an answer of some kind. So I just wanted to like throw that out there real quick, because I mean, like you said, everything is like creativity is very subjective. And like, when we talk about operations and like audits and stuff like that, like my opinion of something is going to be mostly subjective, it's unless there's data that this blog performs better than this. And I don't know 100% know if it's because of the subject matter or the title, unless it's the same blog it's like somebody like A/B tested these things. And that doesn't typically happen. You've got a mess of, a web of content, and you're trying to make it decide what's better and what's not based on almost subjective ideas.
Yeah.
So that's something that,
it's interesting because I see that as a process, and like as you're describing that, it's really hard for me because I know we're recording a podcast and not like working through things. It's really difficult for me to not be like, oh, let's solve that. But I had somebody last week. They just launched some like advertisements or something like that. They're pushing a new offer at a company, and they asked for my opinion on kind of the offer and some of the stuff, and I naturally said, send me some of the data. And so I was looking at all of the different data points, and what my brain automatically does is stick it all in order, look at the engagement and the activity down this process, and it's like, okay, well, how are the ads performing? Is that a targeting issue, or is that an ads issue? We can kind of tweak that and design it. How is the page performing, right? Is it that we're not pushing enough traffic from the thing, or is there an issue with this section of it? How's the engagement on page? How's the conversion? And so like I kind of naturally sent myself down this like, where can we figure out where the bottleneck is in this process and solve for it? And so the same thing kind of goes to content as well, right? It's like, if I write a piece of content, or I'm working on something, or you are, right, how is it performing? Does it matter how it's performing? And what's like the quantifiable science behind the subjective creativity, I guess, around it, and try and like tweak and optimize for that. Because as you were telling that story, like my brain just automatically goes to that, like, let's stick it in a process and let's see where the break point is, and go and fix that. So it's interesting, different skill sets, different perspectives.
Well, that also, the process you're talking about, I mean, I think that's why we know you so much as like the flowchart guy, right? Because that's ultimately that's what I did with those issues where I was like, how do we land on this? And it was creating a flowchart of like asking questions and having to like make it a subjective, or sorry, having to make it an objective, like yes or no. Does it do this thing? Yes or no? If yes, then you keep following. If no, then think about it this way. But even if you think about it another way, there's still a subjective yes or no to this. And so I think that is if we're just talking about writers who are maybe more on the creative side and are writing in a B2B place where all these things matter, that's something that is maybe not like natural to me, that I had to start thinking about, is like, okay, how can I'm going to have to like ask myself a question, and it has to be it has to be A or B. And then from there, I have to ask myself another question until I get to what is the most realistic like answer to why is a blog awareness level versus initial engagement, which also depends on where you put it in the, if we're just getting into ABM terms, where you put it in the progression, if you're where it is in distribution, where does it live and who is it going to? But can you, I mean, while we're talking about flowcharts and giving yourself like objective, decisions, can you, can you apply the same thing to, like trying to carve out like a space in content creation? I hate to say niche or whatever, because I feel like that's become such a buzzword, but I mean, you're trying to carve out a space in your creative journey. Like, do you systematize it and make it like,
What a great question. This is actually one that I don't have a full answer on, but I can tell you what I'm trying and what I'm seeing. So if you go back and look at my LinkedIn, which nobody will, if you go back and look, you'll see that I kind of started content maybe at the beginning of this past year, and then things got busy, structure got whatever. And I've really been over the last year trying to really figure out, what am I passionate about? What do I care about? Because all the advice that you're going to get from somebody is to niche down, or to get specific, or to, whatever, talk about your strengths, talk about what you're good at, and kind of go from there. So I've been kind of in this process this year, trying to figure out what that is. And as you can imagine, I started doing that very systematically. And so I kind of looked across all the different veins of things that I do, things that I talk about, things that I have done from a career perspective. And what I found is that I am really good at the different pieces that I do. But what I am now struggling with and kind of working towards, it's easy to do it for other people, it's hard to do it for yourself, is translate that into an actionable plan or an execution from like a content perspective. And the reason I kind of think about that is really there's two tenets to content creation, and pretty much most things in general, but specific to content creation that I really hold to. The first is, if it's not outlined, it can't be executed. So from like an actual like process perspective, and you've probably heard me say that more than you'd like to admit over the last couple of years, right? But like, if you don't have it documented somewhere, or a plan or a flow or something of like, this is what I want to try, it is very difficult to then execute against something that doesn't have specificity. And then you don't know how to improve if you don't have anything to measure it up against, right? And so creating that standard, creating that outline. So I've been working on that a lot over the last couple of months specifically, is like, what is that mix going to look like for me? Is it going to be live optimizing things? Is it going to be building in real time? Is it going to be awkward working sessions like you and I have had quite a bit? Is it visuals and flow
Like I'm putting you through right now,
which is what we're doing now, right? You know, and this
Yeah.
this is good, right? So is it, you know, is it going to be that way, or is it going to be, I'm not comfortable on camera, so like, does that something I just need to work on, or you know, so what does that look like? So I'm working on the outline to that right now. The other kind of component to content that I really hold to, or tenet that I hold to, is content should really do two things. And you've heard me say this probably too many times too in the last couple of years, but content should build trust, and content should give value. And that's where, like, amidst all the structure and all the process and all the everything, that I boil down to the intent behind the piece of content is like, is the purpose of this to build trust with the person who's reading it and actually give them value, and improve them in some way, even if it's not valuable to everyone, but valuable to a person who's struggling with maybe the same thing that you figured out on your own.
Yeah. So at what point do you like decide that you're going to press play on all of these ideas? Like where do you land on a place where you like feel happy about it? Because I think if I'm just listening, you've kind of like described, like, or you threw out like 4 like quick examples of like something you could do, and it's like, am I going to like build live, or like optimize, or am I going to walk through, like try to build a process? And then you brought up like, I'm not comfortable on camera, but like, you could do a VTuber kind of thing, but on LinkedIn. Yeah. But either way, like you've kind of got those 3 ideas.
Yeah.
Are those 3 ideas that you had, are they each their own pillar, or are they all one thing that belong under one, and you're trying to like fill out the rest of this? The reason I'm asking is because you listed like 3 things that are maybe not like too dissimilar. But when I think about going into trying to get somebody to start creating content or being more consistent about it, it's like, what 3 things can we like focus on that are some way related? Like, I'm going to make it like super basic, but if somebody wants to talk about finance, and it's like, okay, that's cool. What are the other things that we can like talk about when it comes to finance? Like minimalism kind of goes into that, or like, maybe it's more specific with like cash flow or like budget planning or something like that. Like, how can we like branch off of that to something that is similar, but like not the exact same thing, and not too dissimilar, where it's like, I'm going to talk about minimalism and finance and my love of coffee. And it's like, where does the love of coffee fit into those things? Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. Maybe you really get like, maybe for some reason you really go down like the finances of coffee for some reason, but like, and maybe that's just, you just chalk that up as like, that's like my personality, like pillar there that I want to keep included there. But from where you're at, where do you break that into like ideas that you can continue building off of? Because you basically just laid out like 3 series you could start, and it's like, do you start 3 series, or do you approach it in a different way?
Yeah, no. So naturally, I think of it as kind of a process, but getting a starting point out there. Also, for what it's worth, minimalism and coffee could very realistically apply depending on how you drink your coffee. So if you're like me and prefer black coffee, that feels more minimalistic. I enjoy the simpler but more like natural roots of coffee rather than lattes or
but if you use a drip machine, or if you use a pour over, where
that's
are you?
That's true.
I think a drip coffee machine is probably more minimal than a pour over, right? Like it's one piece of equipment.
That's true.
But it may not last forever. Maybe you got to you don't ever have to buy a new kettle.
It's true. Pour over is not
and
electronic. There's not like a bunch of, I don't know. Anyways, not to get too far. I'll talk about coffee forever. But I do think it's interesting because I think everything can be related to a certain extent. And so like when it comes to starting from a content perspective, this is a lesson that I'm like very actively trying to learn right now. I call it the shame bone, but like people who don't have the shame bone are like or just like no fear of people really is kind of what it boils down to. I jokingly call it that. But like I I care a lot about what people think, about people finding value in what I do. And so, like, just even the motion of starting is really difficult for a lot of people because of maybe that fear of what it's going to look like or what people are going to think or going to say. And I don't really have an answer for that one, unfortunately. From a process perspective, what I kind of look at it is in 2 or 3 kind of components is first topic and then type. So, like, to your point, when you talk about pillars, it's kind of my topic layer, right? Or what are the topics of things that I want to talk about? You can kind of subdivide those topics as well. So for me, a lot of it is going to be like process or operations, whether it's people operations or tech operations or, those types of things, or maybe it's optimization as a pillar for one. I love taking a process. And you ever watch the A Team, like the old school A Team? I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
It's kind of, anyways, that's kind of my my thought process. And so like maybe it's optimization within that, right? There's a bunch of different potential sub pillars for it. But then when it comes to starting, that's where you kind of heard the blend of like, how do I start? What's the type of thing that I want to push within that topic? Is it video? Is it written content? Is it graphics? A lot of people are doing graphics and visuals, and flowcharts are very in vogue right now. And so I try to actually avoid those, even though 90% of my life lives in Lucid Chart because of the way that I build. And so like, then I kind of pick a type, and what I'm trying to do is pick a type and stick with it. So pick a topic, pick a subtopic, pick a type, and then how many different iterations of that topic and subtopic can I do within that type? And then move on to the next topic. And like what I've heard a lot of different advice. People say pick one topic and do 5 different types, right? Where it's like do a video, do a written post, do a graphic. And I'm sure there's some logic behind that from an algorithm perspective. But what I really need to do is get into a process and get into a system. And if I'm trying to take one topic and split that across 5 or 6 different motions, it's very hard to get repeatable. And for somebody who has consulting clients, who has a job, a business that they're trying to run, it's hard for me to kind of split those, but I want to control my content at the moment and not outsource it. So like, for me, I'm trying to figure out what is the best medium, what's the best type that I can get on and do kind of what we're doing now and create a lot of content that around topics that I'm comfortable with that then can be distributed the same way, add value the same way, and make it easy for me to develop.
So I have one initial thought that I think it might be, I'm going to like combat a little bit of something that you mentioned. But this could come, the way you described this could just come out of like necessity and like time constraints. But you talked about, I've got my 3 topics and I've got a subtopic, and then I've got 5 ways to create these things. And I'm going to take topic 1 and I'm just going to like run with it. And I'm going to do this through all 5 and just go through until I'm done, and then go, or until I get to a certain point and then start the next thing. My only like red flag, I guess, for that would be, let's say you do that, and whatever topic 1 is in the subtopics under there, and you do that for 3 months, and you're like, this is cool. I've ran through everything I can possibly do with this. I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Do you risk like losing your audience that you just built because they only know you as the live flowchart builder guy? Maybe that's what you do. And then the next one, you're like, now I'm optimizing existing processes. This is what I'm doing now. And you'll have some people that are like, oh, that's the logical next step because he's been building flowcharts and all these things for the last 3 months, and now he's moving on. But then you'll have the other people be like, I wish he was just building flowcharts again. I wish, I don't like his new stuff, and obviously like, then you do that for 3 more months and then you move on. And so, and maybe that's actually the best way to do it. Cause maybe you're like niching down so much that by the time you get to topic 3, the people who were there for the entire time for the last 9 months, like really are interested in those 3 things, and they fit your like core demographic perfectly. But do you like, what if you instead did all 3 like every week, some form of that every week, and it's like build something, optimize it, and then whatever the third thing is. I guess there's 2 ways to go about it. You're gonna have a longer time to get down to your most niche audience, but you're also potentially not losing as many people along the way.
Yeah.
Which, again, if we're talking about niching down and finding your core audience that loves, what you do, everything that you do, like, I guess the most optimal way is probably to just go all in on one thing
Yeah.
and focus on it until you've bled it dry, essentially, and move on to the next thing and the next thing until, as
Well,
long as it's all connected.
yeah,
But
well, and I think some of that comes with topic relevance, at the top level. How do you create and build an audience around that particular type of topic that makes sense? So even if the type changes, right, the topic is still similar. Or maybe your kind of overarching holistic topic is content creation, which is yours, right? And then you've got different subtopics that you kind of push in that. You're kind of building an audience around what you do as your primary kind of central tenet, which in your case is content creation. But then that looks different ways. For me, part of it is I'm not good at this content creation thing, particularly for myself, right? So if this was like a business where you're struggling on a content strategy and you're trying to figure out what pieces, what audience, what whatever, if it's business strategy related, that's great. But when it comes to me personally and my personal content, I kind of freeze up because it's so personal, it's a little bit more vulnerable, it's those types of things. So for me, getting started looks like, can I pick something and a type of distribution for that something that I can build a comfort level around delivering, and then see if it resonates. Again, back to this kind of testing and process things, right? And if nobody resonates with it, if nobody's engaging with it, move on to the next thing. Or if they do, then I've built a process so much around how I develop that it's easier to do. And then I can add kind of to it without like drying up that entire way of doing it. But then you can start to test new things as well. And so like for me, I think it's, how do you get started? You got to pick something, get it across the line, see if people are engaging with it. And if they do, great. Build it so that you can do it repeatably and then add the next thing, versus like exhaust it and then jump to the next thing. I just don't think it's that black and white or linear.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And again, like, it's one of those things, like when it comes to creating content, it's a lot easier to like give a plan than to actually like execute on it. And it's completely different. And obviously, like you said, like, you're going to have people who are going to respond to it and people who won't. And you're going to have things that are like a topic that may be hot right now or something like that. I guess it's just like, how do you feel comfortable, like, not abandoning, but you're choosing to not do other things that maybe you want to do or want to try in lieu of testing this piece out or testing these few pieces out.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's like where a lot of people get stuck, and not even like business content. We've all, everybody knows like the story, like somebody's trying to create something for everybody, but like in terms of like making money, you're trying to get as many people. If you're just creating something for fun, or maybe you are creating it to fuel pipeline, but it's not directly related to like a dollar at this point. How do you like feel comfortable giving up like something else that you would also like to create?
Yeah, it's interesting because that bleeds into a lot into the intent behind the content or the motivation behind the content, and like also the targeting with that, right? So like when we develop content as a business, we're developing content fully knowing who we want the target audience to be. And like history would show us, right, that like when you develop a target, right, you need to create content that directly speaks to them, that resonates with them. And that's exactly how I would do it from a business perspective. You can kind of go both ways from a personal content perspective, where you're going in saying, either this is the type of content that I want to create, that I'm good at, that I like, this is something that I've gotten into. Anybody who wants to follow along can follow on, but my motivation is creative outlet or documentation or, something, right? And then you kind of, people stumble into an audience or a group of people that resonate, whether it's intentional to build that or not, or are you intentionally building your personal content to speak to a very specific audience? And so we see that with sellers a lot, right? Is like they're trying to sell into something, so they apply the same principles from a B2B perspective to their personal content. I want to sell to this person. This is the type of content that they would read. This adds value to them, so I'm going to build content this way. Or creators who are trying to expand their marketing audience so that they can get an influencer deal is going to speak to those topics specifically for that in mind. And I think for me right now, on my kind of content journey is I would like to add value to other operators or other ops folks or revenue operations, go-to-market operations people, or like how to build things, how to think through, maybe even for more creative people, how to think through building constructs and processes and frameworks to make things easier. Maybe that's a niche to go into. But for me, my content right now and kind of the journey that I'm going on is I'm not trying to get anything out of it. I'm not trying to sell somebody. I'm not trying to have them come and buy my services. If they want to, great. If they don't, that's fine. You know, I kind of want to build things that I'm doing on a day-to-day that would help me or could potentially help somebody else kind of think differently or be able to execute on something they wouldn't have been able to before.
Okay, so here's an interesting question, because you said something similar that my guest last week, Benji Block, mentioned. He has a video agency, and I was kind of talking to him about creating content. He's like, I don't create like how to video B2B like business content. He's like, I do that for a living. Like I own this agency that does it, but I don't talk about it. Like he's like, I have a podcast and I don't talk about video content. I just like talk to people and talk about things that I'm interested in, I'm passionate, and things that move me and all these kind of things. And he's like, occasionally I'll post like business updates and like big wins on LinkedIn, but I don't talk about that all the time. So, but I guess for him, like if he's creating videos and creating a podcast and he, you know, I guess where does the link come in to where somebody sees that? And basically the way that you just mentioned, you're like, I'm not creating this for anybody. I'm not creating this to create pipeline for Boost. If you see me and you want to work with me, that's awesome. But where does somebody's, because in a way, like the way you just described that and the way I described the way Benji said, it's kind of like, it's like not intuitive to how we would typically, like as B2B content creators, tell a business to create content, right? Like you should be creating it, yes, to educate and inform. You should be giving a lot of information, but at some point there should be a direct link to your business and what you can offer.
Yeah.
So if you are like you and Benji, like you're going to be creating content that's like, you know, you're building flowcharts and you're optimizing processes. And that's related to Boost in some way, but if you're just kind of creating stuff for fun and you're documenting, and then maybe you get a little bit artsy with your video, and, you know, you start out the video like making yourself a coffee and you've got like a voiceover, you know, you start getting really creative with it. Where does somebody draw the line from the stuff you were putting out as like a founder of your company to then work with you? Like, do you build an audience so big that people are just like, they know who you are and they know that you're the founder of this company and they go check out this company and then they connect that way? And or like, I guess like, what's the like, how do the dots connect there?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, so I've got so many different thoughts on this, and to be fair, there's no right or wrong answer, I don't think. Like as an advisor, as a consultant, and there is a founder or a business that is creating content, right? The tenets stay the same, right? The goal is how do you build trust and give value to your audience? And so with those types of people, they're targeting a very specific audience. They are trying to build towards that way. But if they're coming at it from a business perspective or as a founder who's incredibly passionate about what they do, then naturally a portion of your content will likely fall in the how am I giving as much value as I can to people so that when they do have a need, they're willing to come to me because I've given more than I've gotten. And so I think to an aspect that is, and that kind of goes back to topic and topic relevance and what we're doing. But like, from my perspective as a founder of a startup, pretty much everything is value to me because I'm trying to learn and build as we go along. As a fractional consultant, right, everything is largely valuable to me because it gives me a new perspective or a new thing that I can do. And so from my perspective as well, likely the content that I'm working on and going to be creating is related to what I do on a day-to-day basis or whatever, but not in the sense of like same thing as Benji, right? Not in the sense of like, here's your 5-step process to have a better thing. And like, I'm a frameworks guy, so I may have those things, but I want it to be more of like I'm trying this thing. I worked on this thing today. And like, if this is helpful, I would love that. Or if you have a better way of doing it, let me know too. And just get in this motion of giving as much as I can, but not in the kitschy, like comment, Claude or comment, whatever, and get my 10-step Notion doc, or whatever on how to build I don't care about that stuff. Like I actually want to give and try things and have other people speak into me and give me feedback on the things that I'm trying, and hopefully the things that I'm trying and make public and share resonate with someone or help teach somebody something different. So I think it's interesting where like at the base level, people buy from people work with people. They don't work with a brand or a company or something out there. And so you've seen that shift into more personal content, even from brands recently, humanizing the way that we are perceived, because people buy from people. And I think it's a balance between if you're a likable person and talk about the things that are relevant to what you do, ultimately people will do that. So now the question's out on whether I'm likable or not, and we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that explanation. Because from like, if me and you were sitting on a call with like a client and they just asked us the same thing, I think we would probably push them more towards still being authentic and being known for something, but creating content that circled more around like what the business does. But that doesn't mean that that's like the only way, obviously. I mean, if we're talking about like Scrappy ABM, like we know that Scrappy ABM came from content that was just around like ABM, like that was it. And creating a podcast, starting a podcast, and like going into those kind of things and building off of it. But I mean, there's like you can build a personal brand based on the things that you do that are not just here's my 5-step plan to doing this or that type of content. And like one thing I know about you is that like, and I think like this entire interview is probably like put this out there for anybody who doesn't know this, that like you're a big experimenter. Like you're going to try something and you're like not afraid to deviate and try it another way and try something completely different and spend 40 hours on it and it completely crash and burn and come back and do something different, which is really cool. Like you don't really get like, I feel like you don't get burnout or like too like down and out when stuff like that happens. So I'd love to know like a piece of content or something that you've either created like in your consulting business for somebody else that was like going to be this like game changer, but just kind of like stunk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I mean, if you're not failing, what do people say? If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough or whatever. It's people say the same thing about haters. If you don't have haters, whatever. Anyways, no, I'm a huge proponent in that. And like, kind of on a side tangent, when I manage people, one of the things that I always say when people screw up is the first time is on me, the second time's on you, right? And so like if you fail for some reason, there's usually either a knowledge gap or an experience gap or something. And so I take that as a manager on me to say, let's solve for that gap now because I should have seen that or helped, and then we can go forward and test some more. And so like that's on like the people front. And on the process front, it's very similar where it's like if you fail, it doesn't necessarily mean that like it's a bad idea. It could be. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. But like, how do you view it in a very objective way, especially when it's very personal because you're the one who created it, and say, okay, well, what worked and what didn't? What learnings can I take from that? And so like in your question specifically, I remember kind of early in the Boost days, earlier in the Boost days, kind of post the big AI revolution, I thought would be really cool to I run a very specific type of analysis for clients. I thought it'd be really cool to basically have a light version of that analysis for the public to use and view. So like, instead of paying me to come in and do the full thing, again, try and give value, right? Like, build trust, give value. I spent a really long time training this model on my entire process. And it would execute, I would say it gave good value, actionable things. I define value as, can somebody take this and improve their day today, is how I would define value, to an extent. It's not a universal, but that's how I would kind of initially kind of define it. And so I built this thing where people would just come in and do it on their own, get a lot of value. And so I sent it to a bunch of customers. I sent it to a bunch of people that I had worked with. And I said, hey, I kind of want you to test this out. I want you to look at this. I got feedback on the product working. Product on this kind of process thing working. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I started to take it out. And very quickly I realized nobody was engaging with it. Nobody was touching it. And like, it was you go through the whole process. Ads were working, outbound was working, engagement was working, all this stuff. But then once they got on the page, super high bounce. And then I go down my conversion matrix, right? And I'm like, okay, well, is it relevant? Is it timely? Is it whatever? Is there enough perceived value? Is the barrier to entry lower than the perceived value? All the stuff. And still nobody's engaging with that. So then I went back to the round of customers that I had kind of tested this with before. And I told them what I was using it for and what I was whatever. And they thought I was just going to use it internally to help speed up my internal processes. And as soon as I told them that I was using it as kind of like an outbound motion, a piece of content that people could use externally, immediately all of them but one, it was about 12 people, said that they could have told me that wasn't going to work. I was like, okay.
Was that an audible groan?
Yeah, it was like, oh, that's what you're using it for? And I was like, yeah. I remember I was talking to one guy in particular, and he said, I mean, it works great, but he was like, I didn't come to work with your bot. I came to work with you. And he was like, I was referred here because I know you, I know your process, I know how you would run it. And so he was like, I don't care what you use on the back end because of the output, but if somebody is engaging with you, they're not engaging with you to go through this process of trying to build something on their own. Most of the time they're coming to work with you because they want you, not a public bot. And so it's just interesting from a content perspective too, to be like, there was a lot of value in it. It is nowhere to be found now, aside from my own processes. But people didn't want to engage with it because people, especially when it comes to that, want to work with people, in my opinion. And so like, there's convenience things, and there are things that AI and tools and stuff make better. But ultimately, when it comes to a process like that, like all of these productized services where they're public facing AI running things on their own, I think there's a lot of value in those things. But sometimes your audience want to work with people. And that's something that I missed, assuming that this would give a lot of value, which it did, but not knowing the people that I want to work with just probably want to work with me directly too.
Yeah. So that's cool. It's really interesting just to hear like that, because it kind of seems like it'd be the opposite. Like, dude, because I feel like that's how we think about things. Like, people want to get 90% of the way there and know that get that perceived value, and then go, and then then they'll work with you because you've got like you've got the what's left. You're the missing quarter mile or whatever. Although my first thought was like, but what if you made a video showing how to use it, and it was completely going out to a cold audience that sort of fit the demographic and not like somebody that knew you? That was my first thought. Like,
there you go, pushing the optimization
try it again.
Well, and maybe there is a world where I try some things like that and I get stuff out, because I do like, again, super high value. I think the barrier to entry was too high with that one, because when you're talking about a service, right, like you have to gather information from someone that they may not want to just drop into a random bot or whatever. Although some people do it with ChatGPT, right? And the whole life is in there. But like, I think in that particular instance, that was a lot of it was like, this personal information. I want to know the person who's reviewing it. I want to work directly with you and talk through it. So there may be iterations in the future, who knows? But for now, that one's on ice. Did not work the way that I suspected, and maybe it works with a cold audience. Who knows? But
yeah, no, I think I see what you're saying. I think that having to input a bunch of information coming in from like an ad or something is like, I mean, even just sometimes giving somebody my email address to get like something I really want is like a bit of a burden. So
yeah, well, and that's the conversion theory around, and you and I've talked about that a lot, right? Conversion theory around content development, right? Is like, it's all about the cost of entry versus the benefit of entry, right? And that's kind of, I alluded to it earlier, but when you and I deal with content development and like conversion points specifically, that's what we talk about a lot. It's like, what's the cost of entry, and is the benefit of entry equal to or higher than that cost to the person? And if it is, and they're not converting, then like maybe there's a perceived value issue rather than an actual value issue. But
yeah. This is a good segue to tell everybody listening that if you get to this point and you're like, what's the barrier to entry? Go listen to 3 episodes ago, where me and Evan Cox talked about free thing or paid thing, creating content that's free or paid. So I just want to throw that out there. I think it's a good plug on another episode that would be good to go right after this episode if you have another half hour to burn, or maybe less if you listen to it on 1.5 or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Greg. I really appreciate it. We've had so many conversations like this. I almost said behind closed doors, but not recorded, I guess would be the more appropriate way. So it is nice to hear. I always love talking to you because it's not like it's not ever like here's how I would do it and I'll go do it. It's like, can we go back and forth at each other until we land on something we like? And I think that's one of my favorite ways to talk to people.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's one thing, if I can just give a little bit of plug for you, and then even, how you operate at Scrappy too, right? Like that's something that I know the Scrappy team takes really seriously. Is the, not playing, what do we call it, tennis with our clients.
Yeah.
It's like we don't serve things back and forth. We want the collaboration. And I know that that's something that you specifically as it comes to content and what all this is about is a huge benefit to the way that you operate, is being willing to have the conversation to work through things. And I love that. I call them awkward working sessions, which is kind of what we're having here too. But I appreciate you letting me come on and kind of do what we've been doing for a while now. And hopefully it's helpful for somebody, and maybe we can do it again sometime. So.
No, yeah, we'll definitely do it again. I was thinking I could make this into a double episode, but I think we'll just wrap and we'll have another one later on. Before we hop, I didn't give you the opportunity at the beginning, but I wanted you to have the opportunity to pitch Boost real quick, like just kind of give a quick explanation of what you guys do and how somebody can find out more.
Yeah, for sure. So Boost Ideal is a marketing go-to-market analytics platform specifically for scoring. So lead scoring and account scoring, kind of an advanced version of that, directly integrated with HubSpot and specifically to enable teams. Excuse me. Can we cut that? Sorry.
Yeah, Fetty's got that.
Fetty's got it. I'll start over. Boost Ideal is a scoring platform for kind of advanced lead scoring for RevOps teams and marketers to understand what programs are working, what accounts are engaged, what contacts are engaged, and be able to make programs that not just work towards your right ICP, but actually kind of discover and find and develop that ICP over time. So I'm super excited about what they're doing. And then I am also a fractional go-to-market and operations consultant. I've been doing that for about 10 years. Started out that way with Scrappy, then went full-time. But I'm also open to working with anyone who's trying to either rebuild a system or work through their go-to-market operations. Happy to talk that way as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Greg. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you coming on here. I had to throw up your name one last time so people don't forget.
Throw it up. I like it.
All right. Well, just for everybody who's listening live or watching live, I will not be uploading an episode on Christmas or New Year. So pretty much after today, won't see you guys again until January 8th, I guess. So we'll see you then. And I hope everybody has happy holidays.